And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak today. Thank you. Good afternoon, Georgia representatives. My name is Jules Tarai. I work for the Center for Transportation and the Environment. Presenting with me today, we have Ronald Minsk, the head of Securing America's Future Energy Policy Team. We also have Steve Claremont. He's a senior program manager at Center for Transportation and the Environment. And then Don Francis, the executive director of Clean Cities Atlanta. And then Ruthie Taylor with the Mayor's Office of Sustainability for the City of Atlanta. All right, so we're here today to talk about electric cars. So if I could orient everyone to the slides we have on the side of the wall over there. I would start us off with talking about what are the different types of electric cars. There's really four main kinds. We have hybrid electric vehicles, which I'm sure many of you have heard of before, like the Toyota Prius. And that's a hybrid electric vehicle that uses a small electric battery and motor to supplement a standard internal combustion engine. And really, it provides an increased fuel efficiency, but at no point do you plug it in. So you're always filling it up with gas. But if you drive, smart or use smart driving, you can have increased fuel efficiency. So with these kind of vehicles, you can have a range of 300 plus miles, and your car's going to decide whether or not what kind of power it's going to use, electrical or internal combustion engine. And you just refuel those at a gas station. So an example of that would be a Toyota Prius or a Honda Civic hybrid. Then we have plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Hybrid electric vehicles are pretty much the same thing as hybrid electric vehicles, except that they have a larger battery, and they can actually be plugged into the grid to charge. So there are various designs for combining how the electric motor and then the engine work together. But basically, there's two main designs. One runs in parallel, where either whatever's going to move the wheel would either be an internal combustion engine or it would be an electric motor. So an example of that would be the plug-in Prius hybrid. So it has a larger battery and can actually move all electric range. And then you have series electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And what happens there is the only thing that's going to ever move the wheels is the actual electric motor. But once you start to diminish the battery, then an onboard generator is going to kick on and give it some increased range. An example of that would be the Chevy Volt or the Fisker Karma. And we also have battery electric vehicles. Now, battery electric vehicles are all electric, have no internal combustion engine, and are totally dependent on plugging into the grid for power. So examples of these vehicles would be the Nissan Leaf, the Wigo Life, Ford Focus Electric, Tesla, Smith Electric Truck, and Mitsubishi. And I know we have a lot of material to get through, so I'm going to kind of just go over all the different ranges, and we'll talk a little about that more in detail as you guys have more questions outside with the vendors. And then finally, we have fuel cell electric vehicles. So this really hasn't come to market yet, but it is a technology that exists. Fuel cell electric vehicles produce electricity through a chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen, produce no harmful emissions, and in fuel cell electric vehicles, hydrogen may be stored as a pressurized gas in onboard fuel tanks. And the electricity feeds a storage battery that energizes electric motor. Long story short, it's a great technology, but it's gonna take several more years before this becomes really commercially available. But those are the four main types of electric vehicles. All right, so why electric vehicles? Why are we calling you guys here today? Well, we wanted to talk a little bit about comparing electric vehicles with internal combustion engine vehicles. So starting off with energy resources. Well, electricity we produce here mainly in the United States. We don't need to import electricity. We can make it here in the United States. When you are talking about comparing what it costs to drive the vehicle, one versus the other, it's difficult to talk about miles per gallon or miles traveled. So what we did is just if you looked at 100 miles traveled in an electric car versus an internal combustion engine car, you can see the cost we've broken down over there. So what we've done here is this is the national average. You can see for energy from the EIA. So with 10 cents per kilowatt hour, utilizing electricity, it'd only be $3.40 to travel 100 miles, versus in a vehicle with 30 miles per gallon efficiency, you're going to be spending close to $12. So that's pretty significant savings. And then one point that I think is really relevant here for Georgia is that if we utilize Georgia's super off-peak rate, because we have lower energy costs here in the southeast and other parts of the nation, it's even cheaper. We're talking about $2 for 100 miles travel. That's pretty amazing. And then when you look at the fuel rate, the fuel stability rate, the cost of electricity is normally a lot steadier than the cost of petroleum, as you're all aware. And then when you get to air quality and climate, it's really no comparison there. It's always going to be cleaner with electricity. And then any concerns people have about our electrical grid and how clean that is, slowly over time as we integrate renewables, at least you can get cleaner in the future as opposed to internal combustion engines which don't. But with all that being said, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of electric vehicles, what they are, and how they compare to internal combustion engines. And then I want to turn it over to Ron Minsk to build a compelling case for EVs as to why they're important.
Jules, I wanted to ask you if I could, you have a few speakers here. Is there somebody going to talk about the, I think it's the nonprofit that's set up that's received some federal funds to look into that? I'd like for the committee to know something about that
yes,
and
sir.
where that's at.
Steve Claremont's going to address that issue.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ron?
And this is, Ron, if you'd introduce yourself and tell us who you're with, I'd appreciate it.
Indeed. I want to thank you all for the invitation to come speak. My name is Ron Minsk. I'm down from Washington, D.C. I work with an organization called Securing America's Future Energy and a partner group called the Electrification Coalition. Our group was founded 7 or 8 years ago, and the idea was to talk about energy security from an economic and a national security perspective, not so much from an environmental perspective. The co-chairs of our advisory board reflect this emphasis of ours and the importance of this issue to our national economic security. Our co-chairs are General P.X. Kelly, former Commandant of the Marine Corps, and Fred Smith, founder, CEO, and president of FedEx Corporation. And they're joined by another 10 or 12 retired generals and admirals and CEOs of other prominent American corporations who believe that these issues are really important for our country. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about the oil issues, why it's important to the country, why it's important to consumers, and then a little more about how electric vehicles can help fill this gap. I apologize that it's hard to see over here on the slide, but the important point from this slide, if you look at the top bar, it shows how much oil we use in the United States is the top bar. The second, and then the left part of that, that's shaded a little less dark, that shows how much we use in the United States transportation sector alone. The bar below that is how much oil is used in the next largest consuming country, which is China, then Japan, India, Russia. The point of this slide is that the United States not only uses the most oil of any country in the world, but our transportation sector alone uses substantially more than any other economy, transportation, anything else in the world. So oil is, we're the largest consumer of oil, and transportation is really the largest piece of where it goes. When you look at what this slide is showing here is one of the economic consequences of our dependence on oil. So the orange line that you're seeing that's going up and down, that's the price of oil over time going back to 1970. And you can see that it's had its ups and it's had its downs. The blue bars are U.S. economic growth. And the point out of this slide to take is that whenever you see the orange line going up, whenever you see the price of oil going up, you're seeing the blue bars going down. And what this is showing is the correlation between oil prices and U.S. economic growth, essentially recession. So that when the blue bars are going down from the center line, we're in recession. And you can see that each of essentially the recessions that we have faced since the 1970s has been directly following or occurring at the same time as an oil price shock. This graph here is showing your Department of Energy measures of the cost of oil dependence on the U.S. economy. There are 3 different large categories of it having to do with the costs of price shocks, the cost of sending money abroad. But the point here is that it's cost the U.S. economy approximately $5 trillion going back to 1970, over $500 billion alone in 2008 when we recall oil hit really high prices, close to $150 a barrel. This slide here is showing where some of the largest drivers between oil price volatility are. So we all know that a large part of the problem that we face in gasoline prices is that they're kind of all over the place. They go up, they go down for reasons that are way beyond our control. But when you look at the long-term trends here, what you can see is in the third world, developing countries, the growing demand is indicated on the right, the forecast growing demand. And on the left alone is looking at the demand in vehicles from China alone. If you look at this slide here on the left, the orange line that had been on the top, which kind of went down back in 2008, that's U.S. vehicle demand. The blue line, which you can see rising sharply, is Chinese vehicle demand. And the point here again is that the pressure that the growth of vehicles in the developing world is going to place on oil prices everywhere in the world, including in the United States. it doesn't only affect the macroeconomy. It also has really important consequences to the average U.S. household. Gasoline is a very large expense of people's discretionary income, their out-of-pocket income. So this slide looks at what happened during the last decade. If you look at the bar on the left, this black bar, that represents the size of the average tax, the value of the tax cuts that the federal government took place in 2001 on the average household during the decade. So these are what we think of as President Bush's tax cuts. What each of these blue bars represent is how much more each average family had to spend on gasoline in each year 2001 through 2008. So the point of this is showing that as much money as the average family got back in tax breaks from the Bush tax cuts, all of that money and more went back into spending on higher gasoline prices. So that gives you a real sense of the importance of gasoline prices on the average U.S. household. Why electricity? As Jules was saying, it's diverse. It's generated from a diverse portfolio of fuels. You're not reliant just on oil, but you've got coal, nuclear, natural gas, and a portfolio of renewables that's growing in the United States. The power sector has ample spare generating capacity with its existing infrastructure, especially when charging is done at night. DOE studies have shown you could charge over 100 million vehicles in the United States without having to add a single new power plant. Electricity prices are stable relative to gasoline prices, and as I say, the infrastructure is largely in place. Just to address a couple of the questions that people frequently have about how all this will work. This is a slide that goes to the issue of charging and where people need to charge. This slide shows during the course of an average 24-hour period where people's vehicles are located. So if you look at the green, this shows the hours, the number of vehicles that are parked at home during these hours. So the point is, most of the time, most vehicles are parked at home. The red piece is work. That shows when they're not at home, most of the time they're parked at work. And then you've got relatively small periods of time where they're parked at school, church, commercial, other, and driving. So when you think about where the infrastructure needs to go, we certainly need public charging infrastructure so that people can charge when they're not at home. But fundamentally, most of the time people's cars are parked at home or at work, and that's where a lot of the charging infrastructure is going to have to be. This chart just compares the costs, the operating cost of an electric vehicle on the left, the orange line, to a full hybrid like the Prius, which is higher, to a natural gas vehicle, which is still higher than an electric vehicle, a little lower than a full hybrid, and then a traditional internal combustion engine. This goes to the point Jules was making as to how much cheaper it is to operate. You're talking, probably 20 to 30% of the operating costs, and that's just fuel. Forget the fact that maintenance is a lot cheaper as well in these vehicles. Then there's the question of, but these cars don't go all that far, or at least the perception that they don't go that far. So this slide is showing on the bottom, the bars across the bottom are showing the average daily miles driven for people whose homes are in the center city, suburban, rural, and all. So in the center city, the average car is driving 20 miles a day in the U.S. Suburban, 25. Rural, 20. All the average is 15. These are, again, U.S. DOE numbers. The average trip, 60% of all trips in the United States are less than 6 miles, and only 5% are longer than 30 miles. So what this means is that for most people, this car can handle most trips, and especially when you're looking at households that have more than one car, there is a real place. This slide we'll skip over. It just shows that there's a lot of capacity in the U.S. in the power generating and the power sector in order to charge the vehicles. I'm happy to answer questions now or later, and we're pleased to be a resource for y'all in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. I believe next, Steve Claremont. Steve, you can tell us who you are and who you're with, and
absolutely. Again, thank you, Chairman Parsons. My name is Steve Claremont. I'm with the Center for Transportation and the Environment. And as you just heard from Ron, providing a compelling case for going toward electric vehicles, the next question is, what is the country doing to prepare ourselves for the deployment of vehicles? Last spring, the U.S. Department of Energy issued a Clean Cities Planning Grant with the unwieldy name of the Clean Cities Community Readiness and Planning for Plug-in Electric Vehicles and Charging Infrastructure. I have to take a deep breath on that one. Anyways, the goal of this grant was truly to help communities or engage communities across the country in understanding what it meant to deploy EVs and how to prepare themselves to do that. As a result of that announcement, DOE awarded 16 grants for a total of $8.5 million. And we were fortunate to receive one of those grants covering Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. It happened to be one of the largest grants that was distributed, number one, and number two, we cover perhaps the largest geographic area of any of those grants that were distributed. So the Center for Transportation and the Environment was awarded $545,000 from DOE for what we have labeled the Southeast Regional EV Readiness Planning Program. And this is a collaborative effort between ourselves, the City of Atlanta's Office of Sustainability, who's done a tremendous amount of work with regards to EV readiness so far in Metro Atlanta. As a Clean Cities program, it was imperative that we involve our Clean Cities partners. So Clean Cities Atlanta, Palmetto State Clean Fuels Coalition, which is part of the Energy Office in South Carolina, the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition, and I believe Philip Wiedmeyer is here today with us, and then Clean Cities of Middle Georgia. As well, we've engaged Southern Company, our friends at Georgia Power and Alabama Power, some folks at Clemson University, and the Regional Planning Commission of Greater Birmingham to provide some expertise with the deliverables for the program. Real quick, some of the key activities that we'll be doing during this year-long project is, number one, we need to understand what we're expecting the demand to be for electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Having knowledge of how many and where charging infrastructure is going to be and how many vehicles are going to use them, we can then turn that information over to Southern Company, and they're going to do a grid assessment. Again, the concern I think people might have is, do we have enough power in the country to supply all these electric vehicles? And fortunately, Georgia is probably at the top with respect to capacity to support electric vehicles as compared to many other states. But we're going to go through that exercise to validate that information. Third is to understand what are the barriers to deploying electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. How are we going to make this easier for people to purchase vehicles, people to purchase charging infrastructure, know where the charging infrastructure is, and get this market moving. Fourth is to develop a workbook that we'll make available to all communities throughout South Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama, so that community leaders can start taking some actions within their communities to prepare themselves. So these are things like changing code or changing inspection or permitting processes, these type of things to enable the ease of deployment of charging infrastructure. Finally, fifth is to work with stakeholders to improve policy and incentives to support EV deployment. And finally, educating our stakeholders in their role in supporting EV readiness. So why is this important? Why is it important to have educated consumers? Now, I think everyone recognizes that not every vehicle out there can be electric vehicles. There are some limitations. However, there are a substantial amount of vehicles, especially commuter vehicles, fleet vehicles, that can be electric. So it's imperative that we educate people on the capabilities and the benefits that these vehicles provide. Secondly, having communities prepared to support that installation. The easier it is to get charging infrastructure out there, that means charging infrastructure will move out there a lot quicker. And one of the most critical issues that people have in their mind when they go to purchase an EV is range anxiety. If they know that there's a charging station down the street from them, in addition to the one at home, in addition to the one at work, they're going to get through that range anxiety fairly easily. Third, as I mentioned before, and Don's going to actually speak about the incentives, but Georgia is one of the best states in the country right now with respect to the incentives to purchase electric vehicles as well as the low cost of electricity. This makes a powerful combination for deploying EVs in the state of Georgia. And finally, we think that this creates an opportunity for economic development within the state. As EV manufacturers and EVSE manufacturers, as they start to grow and develop and demand more manufacturing capability and components delivered out there, then this creates an opportunity for Georgia. Okay. Don. Yep. Thank you very much.
I don't see any questions, so
okay.
But thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Chairman Parsons. I'm Don Francis. I'm the Executive Director of Clean Cities Atlanta. The Department of Energy Clean Cities program was established 20 years ago as part of the Energy Policy Act of 1992 to help the United States move away from petroleum as a transportation fuel. The focus of the program for the last 20 years has been on fleets, and we've been quite successful moving fleets in the United States off of petroleum-based fuel for their transportation needs. Some classic examples here in Georgia and Atlanta. UPS, those brown trucks, a lot of them that you see out there, they're running on natural gas. You know about the MARTA buses that run on natural gas. Coca-Cola is making the transition to natural gas. So we are starting to see fleets move away from petroleum as a fuel for their business. But there is an entire portfolio of technologies out there. Not only do we have electric, which is used in light-duty commercial applications. Out front of the Capitol, we have a Smith Electric truck that is being used here by Staples to deliver product to their stores. Very similar trucks are also deployed with Frito-Lay here in Atlanta to deliver potato chips to convenience stores all over the city. But there's also light-duty vehicles, Nissan Leafs, Chevy Volts. People are taking delivery of these vehicles today, commuting to work, going to school, going to church, all the activities that they do on a daily basis. Jules talked a little bit about the fact hydrogen is coming. It's still a ways out. The technology is feasible, but it is not yet commercially available. Natural gas, a lot of vehicles out there with natural gas, and natural gas is moving down into the light-duty vehicle market because now Honda and other manufacturers like Ford and GM are offering light-duty vehicles that run on natural gas. As a result, through funding that we received from the Department of Energy, we are in the process of installing natural gas refueling stations in the city. A year ago, there was only one station in the city. We will be opening up 6 this year. In addition to that one station, AGL Resources recently got permission from the Public Service Commission to use some funding that they have to build additional stations. So these stations will become available. Why is that important? Well, natural gas sells for about $2 a gallon. And you get, about the same range as a gasoline vehicle. Very inexpensive fuel to use, and it's domestically sourced. Propane, we have a number of fleets here in Georgia using propane. DeKalb County has used propane for 15 or 20 years. Domestically produced fuel, about $3 a gallon, saving the county money, and they're spending their money locally. Biodiesel and ethanol, we continue to expand the amount of fuel that is being produced using ethanol or biodiesel. There's a program underway, you may have read about it recently, with some of the cities in Georgia. We'll be taking waste grease from restaurants and from homes, making biodiesel and using it in their fleets. So a lot of activity going on in alternative fuels here in Georgia as well as across the United States. It was briefly touched on about the incentives. We have done a real good job here in Georgia in preparing for what's going to happen. If you look on this chart, the green states are locations, the dark green states are locations where the incentives are at least $5,000 at the state level. Here in Georgia, we have a 20% tax credit on the vehicle up to $5,000, which makes it one of the best in the country. We also have a tax credit for commercial locations to put in public charging stations. It's 10% of the cost, capped at $2,500. We also have HOV and HOT access. An electric vehicle or a natural gas vehicle is one of the very few vehicles out there that you can start free because they're exempted vehicles in the HOT lane. And when you get inside the perimeter, you can stay in the HOV lane because now you're allowed to be in the HOV lane single occupancy. It's called a non-financial incentive. I use it a lot of mornings. I was a little late getting downtown this morning, probably saved 20 minutes on my trip in because I could be in that HOV, HOT lane. I've been driving a Nissan Leaf for the last 6 months, so I'm one of those folks that have taken advantage of the incentives that we have here in Georgia. The manufacturers all have product coming. If you look across the globe, I haven't found a manufacturer out there that's viable that is not going to be building battery electric or plug-in hybrid vehicles because they see it as a requirement to stay in business. If you look at what the administration is asking in the way of 50-plus miles per gallon on corporate average fuel economy, really the only technologies that are going to work are going to be the battery electric and hybrid technologies. So we're going to see a lot of these vehicles. There are various launch programs in Georgia today. You can go down to the Chevrolet dealer, buy a Chevy Volt. You can go to your Nissan dealer, buy a Nissan Leaf. We are having plug-in products come in. Toyota will be building a plug-in version of the Prius. That will be deployed next year. We will see plug-in vehicles from Ford and GM as well. Production is beginning to expand. More and more vehicles are going to be available here in Georgia for Georgia customers. If you look at the list, these are the 8 that we know are available today. Why are they coming to Georgia? Well, one of the reasons they're coming, and we're on everybody's launch list, is that we have the incentives in place to help consumers purchase these vehicles. Right now, they're a little bit expensive. But as time goes on, the price is going to come down. But we need to get the volume up. And these incentives are critical for these early launch locations like we have here. Well, why is this critical here in Georgia? The money we're spending for electricity does not leave the country. If we buy oil, a good percentage of that money leaves the United States and is building, indoor skiing ranges in the desert because they have more money than they know what to do with. We're keeping that money in Georgia. If you're spending money with Georgia Power or your local municipal or your EMC, that money is staying in your community and is being reinvested in your community. So it is a way to keep our economic development going. We're also seeing a lot of development from the vehicle manufacturers. There are a ton of vehicle manufacturers moving into the Southeast. Volkswagen just recently announced they're building a plant in Chattanooga. They're going to be building a battery electric version of the Beetle at that plant for the United States. The Nissan Leaf is going to be built in Tennessee. We have the BMW is going to be built in South Carolina. There will be vehicles built, I'm sure, here at Kia before this is all said and done. So it's an economic development issue for the state of Georgia as well. Jules touched briefly on the capabilities of the vehicles. 20 miles on a charge, 40 miles on a charge, 100 miles on a charge. The issue is you buy the vehicle that meets your needs. If you look at the average consumer, they're not driving more than 40 miles a day. I have acquaintances that have Chevrolet Volts. They're getting in excess of 200 miles per gallon because they're doing all of their driving on electricity, and the engine only runs every now and again. So they've significantly cut their fuel costs, significantly cut their use of petroleum-based fuels. Charging is an issue that we're working on. Jules touched briefly, and Steve has touched on what we're doing for our planning grants to get the charging system deployed. There are 2 levels of charging that the consumer normally uses. Level 1, that's 110 volts. You plug it into the convenience outlet in your garage, charges the car. It takes a long time because there's not a lot of power available at 110 volts. Level 2 is what most customers have in their homes and what you will see at most work locations. That uses a 240-volt circuit, like a dryer outlet, charges that car in 3 to 6 hours. I've been driving my car for 6 months, and the longest it's charged is about 4 hours. Normally on a day-to-day basis, it's 1-2 hours because that's all I've driven that day. In addition to that, we have a technology coming. We're going to start deploying it on a pilot basis this year called DC fast charging. These will be commercially installed locations, and these chargers will charge the vehicle up in 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending upon the state of charge of the car. So it will start to approach the convenience of gasoline, where you pull in, maybe you put it at a Starbucks location, and or a Cracker Barrel. We're doing a bunch of Cracker Barrels in Tennessee under an EV project funded by the Department of Energy. How long do you spend in a Cracker Barrel? About 20 minutes. So while you're in there eating lunch, breakfast, whatever, the car can be charged and you go on your way. So the technology to support the electric vehicles is rapidly approaching. We need to keep our incentives in place. We need to keep the focus on the prize, which is we need to remove the United States' dependency on imported petroleum oil. Saw a film this week called Houston, We Have a Problem. It started out with President Nixon in the 70s saying we had to get off of petroleum. 40 years later, we have to get off of petroleum. And this is one of the ways that we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. You have some questions if you'd like to take them.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm not sure who was first. I'm going to go with who's at number 27? Representative Smith. Okay.
Thank you so much. A wonderful presentation. I just have a couple of common questions. Myself and several members up here are on work in the field of energy. But just as common laymen, has there been much consideration and talk to display what the horsepower initiatives are going to be for these vehicles, number one? Secondary to that, the durability of these vehicles, resale and depreciation, and the last one, has there been any consideration to considering getting NASCAR involved, because that would really and truly show a durability capability that we just hadn't considered. I'm just thinking outside the box.
I'll kind of go in reverse order. There is an organization out there called NEDRA. It's the National Electric Drag Racing Association. I can't remember. It's NEDRA. NEDRA is starting to get they're starting to demonstrate the performance capabilities of electric vehicles. There is a modified, the hobbyists are doing these kind of things today. They call the car the White Zombie. It's like a Nissan 310, 210, two-door little sedan, looks a little four-banger. It's running quarter miles in under 10 seconds. It's really, really fast. I always tell people electric vehicles are fast, they're cheap, and they have long range, but you only get to pick two. So you take a vehicle like the Tesla, very high performance. There is a beginning to form groups that are starting to look at racing of electric vehicles for exactly that reason. Awareness. People think of electric vehicles as slow. They're not slow. They just, you may not go as far as you want to go, so you're always compromising range and speed. But they can be fast. On horsepower, it's a little difficult to do horsepower comparisons of electric motors to gasoline engines for a couple of reasons. Torque is what accelerates you. The advantage of electric motor is you have all your torque at almost 0 RPM. So every electric vehicle I've ever driven, and I've been driving them for 20 years, accelerates faster than its gasoline component equivalent. We actually have had the manufacturers have had to dial down the performance of some of these cars because you couldn't keep tires underneath them, because they would have a tendency to light the tires up very easily. The horsepower is what drives you through the air. Most of the vehicles are governed. My car is governed at 90 miles an hour. It would go faster than that, but it would then have an impact on durability. Electric motors are extremely durable. We have them all over our society, and they run for years. Most people expect electric vehicles to have less maintenance requirements and longer lasting than gasoline vehicles. When I was looking at this Nissan Leaf, one of the things that was going through the back of my mind was, I'm 64 years old. This may be the last car I ever have to buy. Because other than replacing that battery, I got no transmission, I got no engine, I got no tailpipe, I got no belts. Most of the braking is done electronically with the motor. If I don't hit anything, it might go a very long period of time. You asked other questions, and I'm sorry, I lost track.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Representative Baker, I think your microphone probably will work if I hit this.
Yeah. Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. One, at the point of service, other than once you leave your house, at the point of service outside of your house, or let's just say downtown Atlanta, for charging, and I'm assuming that there'll be a fee at that. Will that be based on the KW hours, or will it be a flat rate that you guys would use?
if there is charging, and some businesses will not, think of how Wi-Fi is handled. Sometimes you have to pay for it, sometimes you don't. But at the point of sale, if the supplier, the provider, is going to sell charging services to a customer, because of the regulations in this state and in other states, they are not regulated utilities. They can't sell by the kilowatt hour. And I'll defer to Commissioner Eccles over there if I did get the terminology wrong. But they can sell access. So the customers that are selling charging services today are charging by the hour.
And access would be taxed?
Yes.
Second question. I forgot which one of the gentlemen said that there's an onboard generator on one of the vehicles. Is there a NOx on that, emission on those, that it would run? Would be about the same as the car?
Yeah. All of the vehicles would have to be EPA certified to whatever the current standards are. The Volt is certified as is it LEV or ULEV? Does someone know the answer to that one? It's extremely low emission, but any vehicle sold in the United States has to meet the emission requirements. And California, is it Tier 5? ATP's out. It's Advanced Technology Partial Zero Emission Vehicle. It's the cleanest technology available today.
One more question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. What about, do you see natural gas being at the same service point as a service point for the EVs? Do you see a natural gas service point there, LP gas, a service point there?
Yeah,
also
at commercial locations, one of the things we are looking at as we are building these natural gas stations is having them, during construction, allow for the power requirements for fast charging. We think these are locations where we will put the DC fast chargers. There is also a technology that can go into your home that can refuel your natural gas vehicle. It hangs on the wall of the garage, kind of like a charging station. It takes 3-4 hours to refuel the tank. Very, very similar technology, but it can be done at home at night as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman of Regulated Industries, Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you probably answered most of the questions about it. My concern was about upkeep and maintenance, and you indicated they were almost maintenance-free. That pretty well tells
Yeah,
us.
I'm scheduled for my 6-month maintenance interval, and they're going to fill the reservoirs up and rotate the tires.
Okay.
Maybe update the software. I may need new software.
Okay. Are the dealerships are equipped now to handle all the electric cars?
Yes, if the dealership is selling electric vehicles, then it has to go through a manufacturer certification program to be established. They have the training, the tools, the charging stations in place. I know the Chevy Volt dealers here in town and the Nissan dealers here in town are all set up to do that. Because I also see their information coming in because they're reporting their charging stations in to the DOE website, which is listing all the charging stations so customers know where to go to find these charging stations. Is the Department of Energy maintains what's called the Alternative Fuel Data Center, and they have a station locator. It helps customers find where these alternative fuels are available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Say, Chairman Martin, did you have a question? It says there's not about telecom now. Okay.
I don't know if first of all, I want to take exception with one of the things the gentleman said. I've never known any self-respecting Georgia that could get in and out of the Cracker Barrel in 20 minutes. I take offense to that, if for nothing else, for their merchandising around the cash register.
Exactly.
It takes my family 20 minutes to get out of there. So, other than you mentioned two things really quick. Perhaps it was just your use of the language. You said we have a technology coming. Is that just an overall, there's a technology coming, or are you working on a specific technology in your personal, in your individual capacity?
No, I mean, when I say we, it's industry, because part of my role as the Department of Energy Clean Cities representative is education, and we're doing outreach all the time.
Duly, I was just going to ask for further details about the technology to the extent that
they were publicly
available.
As best I know them, I can answer those questions, and then I have other folks behind me here who are from the manufacturers.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. And the next thing you said, an average 40-day commute you're talking about 40 miles. I'm sorry, 40 miles per day commute for the average consumer. That's the consumer of the electric vehicles.
Everybody.
That differs substantially from what I get from U.S. The Department of Transportation relative to our traffic needs and the average commute and the average commute time in the Atlanta region.
Yeah, the information I'm getting, which is passed to me through the Department of Energy, is that the mean traveled or the mean distance of vehicles driven in Atlanta on a daily basis is about 40 miles. But that's half the cars go further, half the cars go less.
Okay, so not the average, the mean.
The mean.
Okay.
The technology, difference in verbiage, yes.
Thank you. You have further questions if you'd like to take them.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Chairman Geisinger, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Siemens folks build the propulsion engines, motors, for their trolley cars in Forsyth County. Are we doing anything similar for vehicles?
I think we have some representatives. So probably be best actually,
I'll have to ask you if to speak. You'll have to be on the microphone. These are web cast, and they can't hear unless you're at the microphone. If you could make it brief, I would have to ask you to make it brief. If you'll tell us who you are, too, and who you represent.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Edwards. I'm with Siemens. Unfortunately, I can't answer that. I'm fairly new with the company, but there is a new. You're right. There is a facility up in Forsyth that, as I'm aware, we do get involved with that. So, sorry, I couldn't help there.
Thank you. We appreciate it, though.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just to add on to that, this is Steve Claremont from CT. We have been in conversations with the facility in Forsyth at Siemens with regards to hybrid electric school buses and getting them engaged in those type of projects and providing the drivetrain and technology.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Geisinger. Representative Frazier, I think you may have been the next. I'm not sure, but I'm going to recognize you now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The vehicle, the second EV that's on the screen right there, that half of a car.
That is the WeGo Life.
And I have some concerns about that. I was just in Orlando recently, the last couple of weeks, and I almost hit that car parked, going into a parking space because I didn't even see it. It is half of a car. And it was about 3 or 4 of them out in the parking lot, because you can get 2 of those in one parking spot. They can actually park behind each other and take a parking spot. So I'm really concerned about that, because I almost hit that car parked. And I got out and I looked at that vehicle, and that is not a safe vehicle. I mean, where's the battery? And what
was it, the electric, or was it a smart car? There's electric variant and there's a gasoline variant.
It says smart car on it.
Okay, that's the gasoline variant. But they're this. I will let Les Seagrave talk.
My name is Les Seagraves. I work for WeGo Electric Cars, which is the vehicle pictured there. It's not a smart car. It's actually at least a foot longer than a smart car.
Wow.
And we advise the drivers of WeGo, which, as a matter of fact, is the only Georgia company listed on there. We're based right here in Atlanta, providing jobs, and about to double that this year. We provided our first highway speed electric vehicle this past year. So it's a local hometown company providing jobs, paying taxes here in Georgia. We advise our drivers not to pull up so far and to maybe back up a little bit.
Please
just
do.
for that reason.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Chairman Amerson, you had a question?
Yes, sir. My question is more in terms of the battery. You said that the battery would give out first, and I know that unless you've changed things, the cost of the battery is at least half of the price of the vehicle. What's being done in battery research, or are we still using lithium polymers, lithium iron, those kinds of batteries?
I'm going to call on a representative from Nissan who's more technically knowledgeable here about pricing and longevity than I am. I'm a customer.
And then when you get through with that, I have another question
Yes,
dealing
sir.
with the battery.
Yeah, my name is Mark Perry. I'm with Nissan. I'm the Director of Product Planning. We have an 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty on the battery, and the battery's going to go well beyond that. It has 6 or 7 lives past that.
Okay, my next question is: it's still lithium polymer, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Lithium ion.
Yeah. Okay. One of those. I fly radio-controlled airplanes. Okay,
Sure.
and using lithium batteries, and the guarantee I get is not in miles, of course, but it's in what they call 300 cycles. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of that, how many do you ever have to deplete the battery down to some standard? Do you recommend that this thing be recycled every so often? How do you work that?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is what the industry would call memory effect.
Yes, right.
Right. With lithium ion, there is no memory effect.
No, but they work better if you do take them down a little bit.
The lithium ion battery using in your radio controlled car or airplane, yes. Not in a production vehicle.
Okay.
Different.
What is your next generation battery going to look like?
Our goal, of course, as we begin our production in Tennessee, is to get our industry is all about scale. So we have to build a lot to get cost reduction. So that's where we're going next, is try and get cost reduction. Right now, the technology is you add cells, you add modules, you add cost to get something over 200 miles or 300 miles. Technically, you can do it, but very few people can afford it. So our job as an industry is to get costs down, and that's where we're heading to next.
Okay, what's the voltage on your battery?
We have 24, I'm going to answer 2 ways. We have 24 kilowatts of battery on board our particular vehicle. That varies based on how much range you're trying to get. On board, there's about 400 volts of power.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Amerson. I know we have at least one more question. Coach Williams, you got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I drive a smart truck, F-150 XLT. So,
yes, sir.
My question is that on the pilferage side, what are you all going to do? What are you all doing to stop this kind of theft behavior? Is there something within the car that others cannot drive it or steal it or something of that nature? Are you all working on something today?
Various technologies being used. I know in my particular vehicle, I've got one of these things. If it isn't in the car doesn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a theft prevention device, because without this, I don't know anybody that has, probably a teenage boy could hack into the system, but the average car thief is going to be stymied. And this is really, I think, the technology, because it recognizes that I am in the car. And when I walk away from the car and I leave it on, it gets real upset.
Thank you.
And so and I see that technology working its way down to all of the vehicles. It isn't just electrics. I've seen it in other manufacturers' cars. So I think that technology is coming.
Thank you. Representative Dudgeon, did you have a question? You do not. Okay, I didn't see your light, but I thought somebody mentioned you might have it. I believe that's all the questions. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, one thing we'd like to do before we dismiss the group is we had a lot of different manufacturers here, and if we could just introduce them so that everyone knew who they were, so that any representatives that are interested in seeing some of the technology we have displayed out at the Capitol would know, what vendors with what manufacturer.
Okay. Is Ms. Taylor going to speak?
Yeah, mm-hmm. That would be her.
Okay.
Thank you all for your time. This is an honor to be here. It's an exciting field to be in right now. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to introduce some of the representatives in the manufacturing industry that have come out today. I'm going to start with Kodo Automotive, whose electric vehicle is coming out in 2 months. I think what I'll do is going to let everybody introduce themselves, but in the interest of time, I might just run through this. We have Gary Teat.
Hello. Hey, thank you very much. My name is Gary Teat. I'm Regional Sales Manager for Kodo Automotive. I live and work in Powder Springs, Georgia. CODA is made up of 3 divisions: CODA Automotive, which is the all-electric vehicle that I represent; CODA Propulsions, which is the manufacturing of batteries and powertrains; and CODA Energy, which is the manufacturer of the energy storage units. I do not have a CODA here today. I expect a CODA here in Georgia by the end of February. I do have a picture and a brochure of the CODA, which is a regular sedan, by the way. And on the battery situation, our battery is 10 years, 100,000-mile warranty. So I have a picture for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as I call your name, please raise your hand and you'll be introduced. So we have Katie Spellman from Ford, Ken Fry from Gaia. We have Ted Feister and Kurt Kaziski from GM, and Jim Ryan from Mitsubishi. Great. We have Tracy Woodard, Mark Perry, and Terry Komlos from Nissan. Got a whole team. We have Brett Geip from Smith Electric. There he is. And from Georgia's own WeGo, we have Mike McQuarrie and Les Seagraves. Is Mike McQuarrie here? Okay, just Les Seagraves. So the electric vehicle charging stations manufacturers, we have Greg Crittenden from Clipper Creek. We have Rock Henderson and William Rigsby from Coulomb. Thank you. Stephanie Cox from Eco Totality. She's over on that side of the room. Mario Coutinho, Jorge Guerra, Mike Anderson, and Terry Thornton from FSEC. Oh, on this side of the room. From General Electric, we have Dave Carr. Representing Leviton, we have Ken Davis. From Nova Charge, we have William Rigsby, again. And from Siemens, we have Ken Davis and Ray Crow. Oh, we have Doug. Sorry. My apologies. Thank you guys for your commitment to getting some electric vehicles out there. Eaton, did I skip over you? Oh, I'm sorry. We have Pedro and Adam Bird from Eaton. Thank you guys. I apologize. So thank you all for your time. I'll hand the floor.
Well, thank you. I wanted to, first of all, I want to definitely thank so many manufacturers, people from industry for being here, and we have products out there. I hope that members of the committee will go out and take a look at some of the products in front of the Capitol. And Mrs. Taylor,
yes.
If you'll come back just for a second. I appreciate you coming today. And now who do you work with? Tell us who you work with.
I didn't introduce myself. I'm Ruthie Taylor, and I'm with the Office of Sustainability with the City of Atlanta.
The City of Atlanta, and you haven't been there a long time, right?
No, I've just started a month ago.
Okay, well, congratulations on the job. We're glad to have you here today. One thing I want to ask you, we appreciate you all coming and making the presentations. And I have to ask you, I'll ask you, Ms. Taylor, since you're with the mayor's office, is there anything that you're asking of us?
Your support. Right now, we need your support.
Okay.
No
dollar signs, right?
No dollar signs right now. We really just want to let you guys know what's going on so that we can have some state support and spread the information.
Well, we really do. Don, go ahead.
I was going to just add on. One of the things that we're going to be doing with our PEV Readiness Grant is figuring out what we need. And we hope to come back to the committee this summer with ask. The things that we will need your support and help on to make Georgia even more EV ready. So that is one of the major goals of our EV Readiness Task Force, is to figure out what is we don't have. What is it that we do need in the way of rules, regulations, ordinances. We think we're in good shape on incentives. We may need a little tweaking, but that would be all.
Thank you. Really do appreciate you all coming, making the presentations. Appreciate the industry. It's very important. It's very important to me as the chairman, and I know it is important to members of the committee too. I was still a young guy just out of college when that first oil embargo hit, and now I'm an old guy. And nothing really. I think some good things have been done, but nothing major. We still face the major obstacles and challenges we did, back in 1973. Not a whole lot has been done, and a whole lot can be done. And I think that the electric vehicles and that industry is certainly an important part of that. And We look forward to hearing from you again, and we look forward to see what this initiative that you're involved in can come up with. So, thank you. Does anybody with the committee, before we adjourn to go outside, does anybody have any questions, any comments? I never like to adjourn without making sure that anybody has a question, a comment, has the opportunity to do that. Don't see any. With that, this meeting's adjourned, but I hope you'll go outside and look at the vehicles.